Yes. But also this is such a ridiculous thing to be excited by. The thing so what they've done is massively overspec the network.
Yes.
So you can get
enormous amounts of data.
Yeah,
very fast-moving cars.
Exactly, which obviously is what they want. But the other thing that they can do is turn off individual cells and say, right, we've got quite a realistic landscape if you were to compare it to the sort of outside world. If you've got this sort of deployment, what sort of network speeds would Joe Public get? And what does that tell you about the economics of a future network rollout? Now, that's not directly part of that trial, if you see what I mean, but it also gives you a huge amount of insight into how fast a network might look like and how fast, therefore, it might take you to deploy it. So I know that is not to answer your question at all, but it does tell you some stuff that you maybe weren't expecting to find out. So yeah, lots of exciting, interesting things. You've been as well, by the sounds of things.
I've been a couple of times. I was there last Friday.
What were there exciting cars going around the same track?
We had a Skoda. So the first time there was a McLaren.
Which is quite exciting.
Last time.
We when I was there the last month or so, then on the one hand, it was an exciting event. On the other, it was tow car of the year. Okay. So some caravans going quite quickly up a hill is not what people associate with Millbrook most of the time, I think.
And I did 18 months of motoring journalism when I was at the Register.
Ah.
So I went to lots of Millbrook events.
Oh yes, yeah. It's a sort of. It's not a secret, but not many people know about it, kind of thing, isn't it? So, interesting. Sorry, this is a bit of a diversion.
No, it's fine. It's a totally unreconstructed petrol head. You can't. Are there any? Can you speculate at all about social changes that will be driven by 5G?
So I think there is a shift in ubiquitous connectivity, if you like, that does change how people behave, and everyone talks about how it's that sort of cliche of kids are only looking at screens all the time kind of thing, which is not really true. It's a slightly unfair thing, but I think in many ways what the hope for a sort of genuinely ubiquitous connectivity, which is what you could do with 5G in a way that you can't do with 4G,
yes,
to a greater extent, is that you get more integrated everyday connectivity and less sort of I'm now going on the internet and therefore
yes,
I'm looking at this screen. Now, quite how that changes I'm not quite sure. I sort of hope that it's things like the stuff that you're already seeing, whether it's sort of increasing numbers of people getting connected doorbells and that sort of stuff. You're seeing a sort of gradual integration into day-to-day life and trying to push that across across a much wider spectrum of deployment, I think starts to make for an interesting set of social changes isn't quite the right word, but you start to see wider effect.
Well, I think that completely ubiquitous and privatised surveillance, like all those Amazon doorbells, will be an interesting social change.
Which is why we need to get the regulation right? And I think, for instance, what seems to have happened in many ways is public policy lagged incredibly far behind the rollout of a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And now we are much more alive to the need to get it right as it happens rather than after it's happened and fixing it. And I think if you look at what we're trying to do with the online harms white paper, for instance, this is really intellectually really difficult stuff. Yes. What does free speech look like in a world that is connected differently and wired up differently? And given that your sort of the number one commitment has to continue to be to free speech, while simultaneously trying to make sure that there is less harm done to people thanks to the internet than there is currently, that's intellectually enormously challenging. You can see why nowhere else on earth has done it properly yet. But I think it's right that we are. I want an open liberal democracy to be the people having the first go, right? Because I have sort of a genuine faith that if anyone's going to get it right, it's going to be it could be us, and that is nothing to do with 5G.